Perfect. All right, so let's just go ahead and get started here. Looks like we've had a few more people join. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Today we'll be discussing secure and customizable web forms as an essential tool for your telehealth practice. So my name is Jared Bolen, and I'm a technical account manager with Hushmail. I am very excited to be joined by Roy Huggins and Liath Dalton from Person-Centered Tech. Would you two care to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Roy. I'm the director of Person-Centered Tech. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Portland, Oregon, USA. Yeah, and the rest is a longer story, so I'll leave it there.
I was going to say, and a former programmer.
Yeah,
Thus,
and a former
intersection between the technical and the practical application in this context.
Yeah, you definitely have a better way of saying it. Yeah.
And I'm the Deputy Director of Person-Centered Tech, and kind of my niche within the company and as a consultant is related especially to helping practices find tools that meet their security and functionality needs and identify the best solutions for your particular practice, which
Liath
I
is
absolutely love doing.
She does. She's the one of the two of us that's actually valuable to be here.
Well, we appreciate you both being here regardless.
It is.
All right, so as we mentioned, today we'll be discussing why web forms are an essential tool for your telehealth practice, the importance of secure contact forms, especially if you are connecting with new clients through your, say, Psychology Today profile or other directories. This is really important for you to hear. And then we'll have a bit of a discussion on the intersection of security and functionality. Can they coexist? Spoiler alert, I feel they can pretty well, but we'll get into how those two interact here and what that means for your practice. So to start off, what is a secure web form? Well, a secure web form is a form that you access through a web page in which you can enter in all the information you need and then just click a button to submit that to the recipient in a secure manner. The most common application we see for this is just the contact form on a website where a prospective client can enter in their name, their phone number, their email address, and a note and send that to you. However, these forms have a lot of different applications that make them very well suited, especially to telehealth. So here's an example of a new client questionnaire as a web form that someone can fill out. That information gets sent securely. So this is an example of a Hushmail form. So this arrives in your email inbox as an encrypted email and with a PDF attached. So you can store this in your EHR or in someone's file. And one important thing to note is that just because you have a web form doesn't necessarily mean that it's a secure or HIPAA compliant web form. Roy, did you want to touch on that a bit?
I'm just like, oh no, that's so true. Yeah, no, the contact forms are real popular. So okay. So my previous life was as a web developer, and so I mean that was up until about 2007. And then, so contact forms even then weren't so popular, but they become more and more popular. And it's like a real easy little add-in from WordPress or Squarespace or any of these sites, Wix, anything. You can just throw a contact form on there. But you got to understand the typical contact form that I would assume the way it works until shown otherwise is that the person types in info. The info is then sent directly to the company that hosts your website, which web hosting companies, they're not about security. I guess it's not. That's not putting them down. That's just the way it is.
Right.
That's just how they function. And then, like, what they do is they then take that information, turn it into an email, and then email it to you. So it's like two different unsecured trips.
Absolutely.
Through a third party. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how we kind of get around that with the with Hushmail's web forms is essentially there's an encrypted connection that goes from your website if you have our form embedded directly in there. Or just from the web page where we host the form for you. That goes to our servers. That's then sent out as an encrypted email. So that's one of those factors that makes it a secure web form rather than just your standard contact form on your website.
And Can
There's
I
another thing
say
to
a
throw in
little?
there. Yeah. No, you go, Liath. Go. Yeah.
I was just going to say why the security is important is both a matter of our ethical obligations to protect the
Yeah.
confidentiality of client info and prospective client info. And this is where I want to give a little clarity, which is that the recipe for protected health information, or PHI, is personally identifying info plus health information, where health information is about any healthcare service or payment for service, past, present, or future. And future is the big hicker here. So there's kind of a misconception that is really prevalent that initial contact isn't PHI. Like the information contained in it is not PHI because a clinician-client relationship or provider-patient relationship hasn't been established. HIPAA makes no distinctions around what is or isn't PHI based on whether a clinician-client relationship is established. So what all that boils down to is the information that is contained in a contact form, even the most bare bones contact form, is protected health information, which means it does need to be secured, and you need a business associate agreement in place with the service provider that is giving you that form functionality.
Right. And yes, that means thousands and thousands of people are doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Yes,
And that's the thing.
absolutely.
That's a confusing point. You'd be like, can thousands of people doing it wrong? Yes, they can, unfortunately. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's such an important distinction to make, the difference between your standard web form and something that's secure, something where you have that assurance through a BAA that that information is being stored as PHI should be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Can I throw in another thing there too, Jared? Sorry,
Course,
like I know you're like, I just want to get to my thing. I'm like, no, but that the BAA piece is the other piece that I think, because you talked about a secured connection, of course, that's often what we're thinking about. But what people like, what we often don't think about because we don't see it, is that it's not just a secure connection, it's also who is handling it.
Right.
That typical contact form on your web page, that goes to the company that hosts your website. That's people and computers that just host websites, and they whatever the people are typing into this form, they're the ones getting it. So when this person overshares in their initial contact, as happens frequently, right? Someone starts talking about depressive symptoms or family abuse symptoms or something, like, it's people who usually need a lot of anxiety treatment will end up typing a lot. There's things like this that we see frequently. It's very natural, it's very normal, and it's what the person needs to do. And then it just gets sent to a bunch of people who host websites. Not that these are bad people, they're just not the people who need to be seeing this. Like, that's what happens, right? Whereas, like, it's kind of like if the company that like made the sign for your office, also then, because your sign somehow has a contact form. Now the analogy's breaking down, but like, it's like if people were like making their initial contact to the company that made the signs for your office, and they're like, why am I getting this? I'm just going to send it on to you, and I'm going to send it on to you in a way that may not be appropriate, actually isn't appropriate, because I make signs. I don't do healthcare. I don't know how I'm supposed to handle this.
Right.
Whereas Hushmail is like your answering service that specifically works for medical companies or something like that. Like, I'm trying to think of an analogy. So like, if they get this initial contact, it makes perfect sense. They know exactly what they're doing. They are there for that purpose. Like, so that's when we talk about the BAA, that's what we mean. It's about who is doing this for you. Who are the people acting for your practice? And that's another really vital difference.
Absolutely, yeah. And we will touch on a little later here how specifically those contact forms, how you can use them, even if you don't have a website and you're just using your, say, Psychology Today profile. We're going to touch on how you can utilize a secure contact form really effectively there to prevent people from oversharing, and in that way, potentially sending you some PHI. Now, one of the questions we get often is, what's the difference between, say, having a PDF on my website that someone can download or a Word document versus a web form? And there's a few main differences here. The one thing is there's no need for your clients to download anything to use a secure web form. They simply just go to the link for that form, whether it's hosted on, say, Hushmail servers or your own. or on your own website, I should say, if it's embedded in there. There's no need for them to download anything. As well, a web form will adapt and kind of scale to any device. So if you've ever tried to fill out, say, a fillable PDF on your cell phone, that can absolutely be a nightmare. Whereas a good web form will actually scale to whatever device you're on, whether it's your smartphone, your tablet, your computer. The other major benefit in terms of efficiency is you don't have to worry about trying to decipher handwriting. If your clients have handwriting like I do, then you don't need to worry about, and also there's that degradation. Every time a form gets printed and scanned, it's eventually going to look like those handouts you got back in middle school where you could barely make out the text on them. So the other main advantage too with a web form is, again, that information is sent with a secure web form, is that information sent through a secure channel. They're not just sending this to you from, say, their Gmail address or their yahoo.com address. So those are some of the main differences between a PDF or a Word document that you're sending to someone and giving them a web form that they can actually fill out, submit everything securely in that one step.
I just want to say a quick point there about how vitally important it is to have user-friendly functionality in a telehealth practice, especially for clients that maybe had no telehealth experience prior to this rapid shift that had to be made and aren't tech comfortable or tech proficient. It can be a really big barrier and just generate a lot of frustration to deal with the whole rigmarole of downloading forms and trying to wrestle with PDFs. And that's actually been a need for a web form has been something that a lot of our folks have come to us saying, I need this. Or they have some degree of it in a practice management system, but it does not work as seamlessly as this. And so they end up supplementing with a service like this.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, that the client base for telehealth now, it may not be the people who typically would opt for that. They may feel a little overwhelmed by all of the different tools that they're needing now to connect with their provider. So if the easier you can make that, the better, because it's not just the really tech savvy people who are doing this anymore. There's been a major shift that is now requiring a lot of people to adapt to telehealth that may not have gone that route before.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I should say is, even if they do download files and print them out and scan them, they still got to get them back to you.
Yes,
like
exactly.
It's very, just by the nature of how encryption works, it's really hard for them to initiate that with you. Like, they have to be responding to your initiation in order to make that work. But a web form is that thing that gets around it. Like, lets them initiate with you. Yeah,
exactly. So specifically for telehealth, why are web forms so important? As we mentioned, there's that ease of use that makes it you can kind of remove some of those barriers to entry that a lot of people might run into if they're not particularly tech savvy. Again, there's that built-in security where they can get those forms back to you in a secure way. And it just does make it easier for your clients. Not everyone has a printer or a scanner these days. And if someone has to go to a store to print out their form, then take a picture of it on their cell phone and send that to you, it's really not going to be a good end result.
No.
And this just kind of streamlines that process, gives you one format that you can quickly find all that information in that you need. So specifically for telehealth, a lot of forms are considered essentials. And Liath, I think you might have a lot of really great insight here as to specific types of forms that are required for a telehealth practice. Is there any information you can share? So we have, of course, like our standard intake forms, consent forms, self-assessments, contact forms, but
yeah, absolutely, each of those. But in addition, and when we're talking about a telehealth specific practice, one essential element is to also have a client tech and safety recovery plan, which is a collaborative document. So in the sense that you need the client to provide a lot of really important information that are essential for you to have in order to be able to perform your legal, ethical, and risk management obligations. So this is a form that will typically be actually completed during an intake session. Some providers will have a client fill in details prior to a session, but it can be helpful to do it together with the client during session so you can have conversation about some of the really specific points in there. So that is one vital form to have in a telehealth practice. Of course, in terms of informed consent, there's your standard consent to treat, but there are specific requirements for telehealth informed consent. So this was an interesting need arising at the start of COVID, was a lot of people, of course, already had their regular consent forms in place, but didn't have a telehealth specific one. And if they didn't have this facility to be able to get it to clients, were resorting to snail mail and like all kinds of acrobatics to
kind of shocked at how many people use snail mail. I didn't imagine they tolerate it so much, but it did.
Because it was otherwise, I mean, a really inelegant or unsecure process. So and one note about the assessments, because this is one of my favorite things about the Hushmail functionality, is the intelligence scoring that it does, and the templates that you already have, like for the GAD-7 and PHQ-9, which can really make things more efficient when you're needing to do those sorts of assessments and you're not then having to go through and score them yourself. So if you do that as part of your intake process, that can also help make things more efficient and optimized with that first client session. And I also just want to say that we want all of this to be able to be put into place at the outset in a streamlined way so that there aren't barriers to care for new clients. And we saw a lot of folks who were reticent to take on new clients in this current context because of not having functionalities like this. Now we're at a point where it's clear we're in this for the long haul, and we're in a context where there is such increased need right now as well, that there is a huge uptick in people looking for care and to establish a therapeutic relationship for the first time. So you don't want to miss out on being able to provide care in a time of need. And so having good tools that help equip you to be able to respond to that need are really important.
Right. And if you've been wanting to start a group therapy practice, by the way, now is the time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like the people we work with who run groups, they're like almost all, maybe all, are like having trouble finding enough clinicians to hire.
Wow.
It's a huge and like, you know, when you have a group practice, you can set up things like these infrastructures, and like, you know, it impacts however many clinicians you have, instead of like every individual practice having to set up their own.
Right.
You know, like there's a lot of efficiency in that.
Absolutely, yeah. And when it comes to a group practice like that, if you're creating one set of web forms, that's something that can be shared amongst everyone. So you know, everyone can send these forms out. There's no need to you know, to manage kind of combining all of these PDFs that maybe different people are used to getting different information. You can just quickly merge those all into one standardized, you know, intake form or consent form and send those out. So that, again, really streamlines the process. You don't have a ton of different versions of these forms floating around.
Right. But you can make specific forms really easily still. So if you need a slight difference in each form for your individual providers in your practice, you don't have to recreate a form from scratch each time to make those new forms. You can just copy an existing, like your template form, and then change the particulars that you need to.
Absolutely.
So a thing I think probably, I don't know if you know the slide about this, but this is a moment where I think it matters, is for clinicians who are looking at the things like intake, consent, self-assessment, most especially intake and consent. And what we're looking at there is like, what I care about is that the person signed it. They read it and signed it. And I think the kicker here that I think we get a lot of questions about is that is an electronic signature legal, and what kind of thing do you need, and all this kind of stuff. And certainly in the United States, electronic signatures are legal, but legal is not the same as robust.
Right.
So like I can just send you a Word doc that says this is my electronic signature, and then I type my name. That's legal. That like and I don't mean like it's like a common law thing. I actually remember the Clinton administration signing that law in the late 90s, back when I was in my early days as a web developer. It was a big deal in the early development of the web, was the how electronic signatures became a real legal thing. The problem is, it doesn't matter if it's legal if you can't prove that it actually happened. All right, like if you can, like that's the thing, like if you can't prove that it's their signature, like if the client just says, nah, I didn't sign that thing, anybody could have typed that, that wasn't me, how are you going to challenge that? So that's where electronic signatures get interesting, is like how well the electronic signature is able to like sort of forensically indicate that it was actually signed by the person who claims to have signed it, right? So like the Hushmail has systems for that. So these forms don't just type their name, like there's an actual like place where they can draw a signature, and it has the technical backend stuff. I don't want to get into the details of that, like help authenticate the signer, so that you're not left just having to claim, yeah, it was the client who signed it because they're the one who sent me the document, or whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really key distinction to make for sure. Is one of the reasons why our forms with e-signatures function a little differently than just having, say, a form like a contact form embedded on your website, is because when there is an e-signature, we want to make sure that you have tools to verify that it's the right person. So with those, a form with an e-signature, it gets sent to an email address. It goes out as an encrypted email. That person authenticates on our secure site. They can either type in their signature or draw it if they're using a touch screen, or their mouse if they're feeling especially brave. And that essentially, they also just check a box stating that does represent their signature. That goes back with that information that you can use to verify that. Like you mentioned, you can see when they viewed the form, you can see when they submitted it, you can see the IP address from which they've completed it. So should you ever need to, to back that information up, we should be able to provide you with the information you need to do so, to say that it actually was this person who signed it.
Right. And it's the electronic equivalent of like when lawyers tell you to have clients fill out forms using blue ink instead of black. So like the blue ink indicates that it wasn't photocopied, right? Like there's similar things here. Here it's like whoever signed this was able to access that email address.
Yes.
Like
exactly.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's definitely verification there. That's really important when it comes to those consent forms, especially. And part of that too is, because a lot of people have been sort of forced to adapt to telehealth now, there were a bit of relaxation in the types of communication tools that people were allowed to use. But this is probably the best opportunity there is to really future-proof your practice and make sure that you're using tools that are secure, that do meet those requirements. So once we're out of this, you're already set up to be able to offer telehealth on an ongoing basis, even if this wasn't what you envisioned doing at the beginning of the year.
I gotta say though, I think using an unsecured contact form, I don't think that is in the notification enforcement discretion, excuse me. Like I don't think they're covering that. I think what they're talking about is like the video software you use.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you are taking like forms unsecurely, I don't think the feds are gonna say, oh, that's right, that's that's something we're allowing. I don't think so.
For sure. That's a very important distinction to make.
Right.
So something we touched on briefly is the ability to use a secure contact form as an alternative to someone being able to say to message you directly through an online directory that you're a part of. Liath, did you want to touch on that a bit?
Absolutely.
Yes, please.
I would love to. And I'm going to use a specific example here just because it is so dominant. And a lot of folks will have profiles and be aware of how it functions. So with a directory profile like Psychology Today, one of the features that that profile includes is that email me button, that when a prospective client clicks it, it pops up a little window where they can input their message to you and tell you about themselves and send that off. When they send that off to you, it is being handled by Psychology Today's proprietary messaging system. They are a third-party service handling protected health info on your behalf at that point. But very interestingly, they will not do a business associate agreement that covers that component of their offerings. I got really excited for a moment when they released Sessions earlier, not because of Sessions, which is their video platform, but because they were including a BAA with it, but unfortunately specified very explicitly that was just for Sessions, not for the messaging. So obviously it's problematic then if we are using a system to handle protected health information, a business associate relationship is present, but we can't get a BAA for it. But when it's so prevalent and a really big means of getting new clients, how do we replicate that functionality as much as possible while still providing security and meeting our HIPAA requirements? And this is where Hushmail and having a secure contact form comes in. So our guided workaround for this issue with directory listings is to set up your secure contact form in place of using the systems, the directory listings proprietary service, and link to that. So like with Psychology Today, we say disable the email me button, replace the URL in your website button with a link to this secure contact form that you set up through Hushmail, and then add a message to your profile to the effect of just click the website button and you can send me a secure message. And I think framing it in terms of we're at the very outset of our relationship, I am taking care of your security and privacy is important. Like that's not a negative. That's something that should make clients feel held from the outset.
Right. Plus, you can also then customize what they fill out. It's not whatever Psychology Today wants to give them. You know, you can ask them whatever you want to ask them because it's your form.
And you know it's secure.
Yeah.
And it really is replicating the functionality in the sense that there are no additional clicks.
Yeah.
It's not.
Like form. Right.
Yep.
And what's this brings up again that question that I kind of anticipated earlier of the whole but thousands of people use this, how can it be wrong? Yes, thousands of people are wrong. And it's really sad. It's like if it sounds sad or weird or like something that you're trying to fit into like your learning schema of the world, I get it because I've been struggling with it for the 10 years I've been doing this job, is the fact that thousands of people continue to do it wrong. And like, don't just mean like, and it's not just, I'm really not pedantic about that. Like there are points where I think the right way, as it were, the HIPAA way, is not necessarily important. There's a couple of points where I disagree with things they say, and I'll say so. But most of the time, it matters because what's happening is your client is typing whatever they need to type, and Psychology Today is getting the message, and then they forward it to you. Right? It's not It's not that Psychology Today just sends it on to you. It doesn't go directly to you. Like people at Psychology Today, their computers get the message, and like they can read the message, and they've given you no agreements regarding what they're going to do with the message.
Right.
None at all. Like they have no legal reason under any contracts to treat that message in any particular way. And then they send it to you in an email, like a normal unsecured email.
Conventional email that
Yeah.
goes across the internet like a postcard. There's no protective envelope of encryption around it.
Right. And like the thing, it's like what I said, like we totally get that you need Psychology Today. Like if you need it, you need it. Like we're not going to tell you to shut that down, but we would like you to think about how to get those messages. And the thing that's really kind of painful there is this is actually one of the big problems of HIPAA. A lot of complaints about HIPAA are that it doesn't cover enough. Is that you get things like Psychology Today who get away with this because the potential for them to have any negative repercussions for creating a situation where they have an oligopoly, they have an oligopolistic ownership of marketing for therapy practices. And they can basically do things without whether you like it or not. And then they'll set up a situation where you basically have to allow yourself to be non-compliant with HIPAA and put client information at risk in order to use their service. And they can get away with it because of the way HIPAA does and doesn't enforce. And Psychology Today absolutely will get away with that. They're not an ethical company. I have opinions, just so everybody knows. But
they're a big company headquartered in the Cayman Islands. That's an indication.
Right.
It's no longer by therapists for therapists service.
I don't know if it ever was,
which is
but okay.
Very clearly reflected.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But yeah, and it's not just here to like put down Psychology Today. It's like, luckily Psychology Today lets you shut that feature off, and there's a good solution. So you can use your Hushmail form instead, because Hushmail is that professional services company that says we will be your medical services company.
Absolutely. And Roy, to what you mentioned there, it is definitely a little distressing to think that yes, there are thousands of people who are doing this wrong, but again, it's a really great differentiator for your business, the fact that you are one of the ones who takes this care with this information. And as knowledge about security online becomes more and more prevalent, as people get more and more well versed in what it means just to fill out a regular contact form and have that sent to who knows where before it gets to the person you want them to, that's going to be, I think, a really key factor in who chooses which therapist. If I see that someone's using a secure service to manage my information, if they show that care right out of the outset, then I immediately feel way more at ease with them.
Yeah, that is definitely true of me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I might do a code inspect on folks' sites just to decide how I feel about.
Right. But even less nerdy people than us also still agree with this. So
yeah, it's true.
Fantastic. So that brings us to a really good point here. So can security and functionality coexist? And I feel like through what we've discussed here, it becomes pretty apparent that not only can they coexist, but in often cases, they're pretty intrinsically linked. The most secure way of doing something can also be the most functional. It can be the more efficient way, especially when it comes to secure web forms.
Absolutely. And, something that we've seen as a kind of interesting side effect of folks trying to reduce the sensitivity of information that they're collecting. Like when their spidey senses tell them, okay, this is just a regular web form, I want to kind of ask for the minimum info necessary, right? So maybe just name it, phone number, email, and a short text input box for a contact form. I mean, it's still PHI, so it does still need to be secured, but they're trying to reduce the sensitivity of information that's collecting. And unfortunately, though, that means that you're reducing your functionality and efficiency too, because you can so much better optimize your practice and your intake process if you are able to ask for all the information that is useful to have at the outset of establishing a new relationship and determining fit, and to be able to do so without worrying about security implications, like aside even from the HIPAA violation aspect of things, but just you want to start this relationship out on the right foot, and make it clear that you take confidentiality and security seriously. So having a secure contact form gives you the ability to ask for the information that is most useful, which in turn makes things more efficient. So to me, that's a perfect example of where security, functionality, and efficiency all come together beautifully, and also not at a great expense.
Yes, exactly.
That's
And
exactly
that is, yeah, that's a really key factor too, because of course, you know, all of these, having these tools available is fantastic, but if they're priced completely out of reach, then, you know, it doesn't really incentivize anyone to move in that direction. You know, there's a lot of providers out there that will charge a lot extra to give you a HIPAA BAA, if they even offer it at all. And that's definitely something to be on the lookout for when you are evaluating different tools for your practice.
Right. A thing I also want to say there, as a counselor, professional counselor, I teach ethics to counseling students, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I'm in the way counselors are trained. And I remember when I was in my internship during school, my last year master's program kind of school, we were, you know, my internship site, they were like, you need to be ready to talk to clients even when you're not here. So here, we're going to give you this sheet, and you're going to maintain a list of your clients' phone numbers, and please use their initials so you can de-identify them. And we also learned about de-identification as being, just in general, the way to do privacy and security. The idea is we just don't identify the client, and therefore then we can have this information in our date books or on our sheets or things like that. And the thing is, like, the way we learned in school classically, I don't know, not every program does it this way now. Certainly mine doesn't, with me teaching ethics, doesn't do it this way. But like classically, like the idea of de-identification that we learn from an ethical perspective or the professional standard perspective is not how HIPAA sees it. It's also not how anyone in security sees it, but it's not an issue of it being wrong or outdated. It's an issue of a different perspective. Because classically, professionally, we weren't actually de-identifying. We're just reducing how identifying things are. Like, because if I have this sheet that's got like client initials and phone numbers, and it's like Roy's client sheet, like the risks to this are very low. Like there's not a lot of risks here, unless like a stalker of one of my clients like picks my pocket or something, you know, like, and it's a very different thing from the risk of this being an electronic format flying all over the internet. And that's why the difference is there. It's not that we were wrong, it's that we were looking at a different context. Like Liath and I were saying on our session this morning with our office hours session, we are really good at securing paper. Like we know what we're doing with paper, and like we're really good at it because we're actually very privacy minded, and we're really good at knowing when something shouldn't be somewhere where someone can find it. The problem with digital information is we can't see it, so all those senses just can't apply, right? And so a thing we got to remember is that identifying clients is actually really easy to do in an electronic context. So on that piece of paper, the funny thing with that piece of paper with the initial and the phone number is that every single piece of information on that piece of paper is considered to be identifying under HIPAA. The client's initials are identifying under HIPAA. The phone number is an identifier under HIPAA. Like all that stuff is an identifier. So this is, from a HIPAA perspective, this sheet is not de-identified at all.
Right.
And what happens is, because I'm trying, and so here's the kicker, because I'm trying to de-identify, I make the sheet less useful to me.
Yeah, exactly.
The sheet has less utility to me because I'm trying to de-identify, but I actually fail at de-identifying. Right? So the point is, like, basically, if I can identify the client, then it's not de-identified, right? And I look at this and I can know who that client is. Clearly, it's not de-identified. But the problem is, maybe I don't, because I got two clients with the same initials. Oh, crap. right? Like, that's the problem here. So why don't I just write out their names and then keep this piece of paper secure?
Mm-hmm.
Why not just do that? Yeah, because I can keep a piece of paper secure. I do it all the time. I got a file cabinet full of paper. Like it's like, security experts for the longest time told you to write your passwords down and put them in your wallet because you're really good at keeping paper in your wallet secure from other people, if you know what I mean, right? So like, we can do that. And so that's the same thing here. That exactly what Liath's telling you is like, if you're trying to minimize the information you get because that's your security scheme, you're removing functionality from yourself. Like you're ensuring that you're not getting everything you can out of it. And you're probably not succeeding as well as you'd like.
Exactly. Yeah. You end up making yourself less efficient while also not really improving the security in any meaningful way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's why we're like, don't do it. Just choose. This is why like the security and functionality coexistence matters. You just get the secure environment and then do what you need. They don't have to hold back. Ask for whatever you like. Don't use initials. Use their name so that you can look at it and go, oh, that's so and so, because they have their name, not some initials. Just go for it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
At a time when everyone has enough cognitive overhead, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Simplifying things so you aren't having to go through, like, try to jump through hoops or have stress over the security going awry is so worthwhile.
Yeah.
On so many levels.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that is a great point that right now we're kind of contending with more than we have probably ever had to. And a lot of the mistakes that I've seen when people will send out information to the wrong client or something like that, it's because they're making things less efficient for themselves by having, like a list with initials and an email address. And then, they think one JS is a different client, and things can get mixed up really quickly, and that can have really severe consequences.
Right, exactly. And that's and this is why, like, if you get into the theory of the world of information security, or even any security, even like guards and physical security, it's like a really core principle is that you need to secure the space in which people work. Not like your job is not keep bad guys out. Your job is ensure good guys can do their job without risk or with minimized risk. So like if you're hampering yourself in an effort to do better privacy or security, there's probably a better way.
Yep.
Absolutely. And yeah, this is using tools like secure web forms is a great way to help minimize that risk, because this information is being, say, stored as encrypted, minimizing that risk while still improving functionality. And that's really what everyone should be striving to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we are getting towards the end of our hour now. I think we have a little over 10 minutes left. I just wanted to quickly check and see if there are any questions. While I'm doing that, do either of you have any other points you wanted to add in?
I think we covered it pretty well. I'm curious to hear what the questions are.
Yeah, because that's usually at this point, it's more about responding to the needs of the audience. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have a couple of questions here. One is, will we have access to the slides? Yes, I can absolutely send those out, and we'll also be sending out a recording of the webinar to everyone who's registered. So keep an eye out on your email for how to access that. You can watch this again at your convenience. If anyone registered and they didn't end up attending or you missed part of it, don't worry, you'll get the whole recording shortly. A question here that's really interesting is, who else could create the kind of service that Psychology Today provides? Are there reasonable alternatives out there? Maybe someone a little more mindful of what therapists are actually looking for.
Well, yes, but okay, I'm a fan of Good Therapy, goodtherapy.org. I know them all. I know them personally. They do walk that talk. It's not just a brand. And but I mean, the thing is, they also have the same kind of form problem, and I have talked to their founder about that. He's concerned about it, and so like that tells you that it's a problem of business problems versus like ethics problems or support problems, because it's like the difficulty is you can have a different service that is much more ethical, but a directory service, like the thing that makes it effective is its reach, not like how it functions.
Absolutely.
So like, like psychology today dominates search, so they win. That's just how it goes. Good therapy is like second place, which is good. I'm glad, but then I think part of the good therapy, then like the main reason these services have these contact forms that go through them instead of do something secure, right, is because they need that information in order to be able to track and report the success of what they've done for you. Like they need to be able to tell you, hey, look what we did for you, so that you keep buying our service. And they can't know what they've done for you unless they're the ones collecting the information.
Very true.
And so
very
like
true.
that's the problem. So even if like someone like clicks to make a phone call, it still goes through them. And that's like, look at how much they're spending, how much energy and money they're spending just to be able to know if the contact from a new client came through them, rather than sending them directly to you in a way that's secure. Right, and it's clearly, I mean, from one hand, we can be like, oh man, that's not necessarily in my client's interest. On the other hand, you go, well, clearly, because every directory does this, including ones that have very ethical people behind them, there's a business issue going on here that they're struggling with, right? And so, yeah, that's just kind of it's a situation that it's difficult to tend. It's untenable. Once again, if HIPAA were enforced differently, like basically where they're better at saying you have to do things securely, then the ethical companies could win by being ethical. But unfortunately, that is not the situation.
Yes, absolutely. So going on to some other questions we've got here. We have one, just some feedback saying that a lot of the comment says, my experience is that most people think I'm nuts for caring about the security that you just discussed. And hopefully that's something it's something that I've noticed changing in the, the 4 years that I've been, say, working at Hushmail, is the attitude toward that is really, it's shifting. It's a slow shift, but it's shifting. More people are concerned about how you're handling that information, because we've seen firsthand the consequences of that information getting out. And that's a really, really scary thing, especially in a therapy context where you're dealing with some incredibly personal, private information.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree, by the way. I have also noticed it getting better.
Yeah. I feel too, like, in terms of silver linings right now, that honestly, so in the COVID context, we have seen a huge uptick in cybercrime, and cybercrime specifically targeting health information. Like health info has always been more valuable on the black market than, like, on the dark web than credit card numbers, for example. Way more valuable. But that's it, uptick in it being targeted even more heavily now, and people's awareness of that is leading to more care about security and not dismissing it as kind of like, oh, what is the real implication or impact of that. So I think we have an opportunity to be better consumers as well, to hold the companies and services that we use to the standard of protecting the information that we're entrusting them with, and to just make a shift kind of collectively to upholding the importance of these items.
Yeah,
absolutely. So one other comment we've got here in the questions, it's not a question, it just says yes in all caps. So I'm taking that as people are definitely finding the information that we've shared today helpful. So thank you so much for that. That's a nice little pat on the back. So the last thing we wanted to go over is, of course, this time of year, there are a lot of special offers out there. We have Black Friday, Cyber Monday coming up. So we wanted to highlight some special offers. If either of you wanted to discuss the prize you have for the teletherapy from the home or mobile office CE course.
You want to
Yeah.
live? Yeah, go for
Yeah,
it.
go for it.
Oh, I'll go. Okay, I'll
Oh,
go for it. Yeah, no, I get it. It's fine. So like, yeah, we did a couple weeks ago. Basically, this is following on Liath's commentary about increases in cybercrime, and especially in the COVID context. It's basically, this is a response to us trying to figure out what y'all need and then finding and figuring out how to help with it. That's essentially what this was. So COVID hits, everyone goes home. It works from there. Oh man, how do I manage? You know, maybe I've figured out my security game and my HIPAA compliance game, and now I got to do it from home. What changes? Or if I'm running a practice, my people are doing it from home. What the heck are we supposed to do? How do we tell them what to do? That kind of thing. So, and then of course, over the period of COVID in the security world, the big news that's constantly coming out, they're constantly talking about is phishing scams, phishing scams, phishing scams. And the reason they're doing that is because with everyone working from home, bad guys are like, here's an opportunity to really get in there. And so we were like, okay, let's do a training program that solo practitioners can use for themselves, group practices can use as guidance for their teams, both clinical and admin teams. And so it's basically about, you know, the issues of security and also teletherapy standards of care. The two things, how they're impacted by working from home or from mobile offices, because that's been coming up for years. We figure let's cover it here too, right? Like, you know, if you want to be in an RV and do your teletherapy, you know, you can do it. It's hard, but you can, and we talk about how you would, right? We also talk about what you need to do in that home office. Like, what are the HIPAA security standards you need to that arise there, and how do you meet them? And so the course could also, you know, for those who are the security officer of a practice, the course can help you develop your policies for what you need to tell people who work from home to do, and you can then give them the course as a training item, you know, for your security awareness training, what you need to do for HIPAA compliance, and also just to make things run well. And yeah, so we're giving a few of those away.
Fantastic. And you also have a Cyber Monday deal as well.
Yes, we do. I'll let Liath talk about that.
Oh, yeah. So for nearly 6 years now, we have had an ongoing direct supportive consultation service called Office Hours, which we are continuing to offer, and our Cyber Monday special is on that. If you sign up for 1 month, you get 1 month free. If you sign up for a year, you get extra time free. So that's for our traditional office hours, which is oriented towards solo providers or solo plus providers. So you don't have additional clinicians in your practice, but you might have an admin or a helper in your practice. And then very excitingly, we launched a group practice dedicated office hours service. We had our inaugural session this morning. And it was everything we hoped it would be.
It was great. It was so awesome.
It was really great. And so that is dedicated to the group practice specific questions and considerations that arise. Kind of intended for group practice leaders, and that is also on a big celebratory launch special right now of 3 months for signing up for one, or if you sign up for a year, you actually get basically 4 months free. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So come join us. And I should mention that for the group practice office hours, Eric Strom, who is our teletherapy and HIPAA attorney friend and colleague, hosts one of those sessions per month. So it's a great opportunity to get his perspective. So come check it out.
Fantastic. And here at Hushmail, we do have our annual Black Friday sale coming up. It's definitely the best deals that we have year round. So good, in fact, we can't actually release the details of that just yet, but we are going to be sending out a link so you can register for updates. You'll get an email when that sale's live, getting all of the details. So we'll be sending that out along with the link to watch the recording, so you can register for that, keep up to date, and then get some really great pricing going forward.
Yeah, cool, right on.
All right,
yeah.
Well,
actually, can I say one last thing? I was not asked to say this. No one asked me this. No one paid me to say this. But just to let you all know, I've been a counselor for, I graduated in 2010, and I've been doing person-centered tech almost exactly since that point. No, that's right. I graduated in 2007. I started my practice in 2010. And I was a techie and a web developer all the way back to the late 90s. Hushmail was a pioneer in all this. I
Yeah.
remember when Hushmail was founded, it was a big deal to everybody. Everyone's like, whoa, check out this company. There was all this big researchers going to visit the Hushmail headquarters and vet what they do. And so when I got into practice, that's why I went to them, because I trusted them. And I have 10 years of a lot of experience with a lot of providers. Hushmail has really great competitors who are fantastic companies with great products. I still really recommend Hushmail, not just because of how you can trust them and how the product is good, but also the price. They give you all that, and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and they give great support. So I was not asked to say this, but as a colleague to colleague, I'll just tell you, it really is worthwhile, and I use it myself.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Roy uses
Yeah.
it in his own practice, which
Yeah.
to me is like the highest testament that you can give.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That's a fantastic endorsement, and we really do value the partnership that we have with Person-Centered Tech. And thank you both so much for joining me on this webinar today. Really appreciate all the information you were able to share. I'm sure our attendees did as well. So again, everyone just keep an eye out for that email coming around with the information on those special offers that we have, as well as a link so you can watch this again at your convenience. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to reach out via email. You can simply send a message to sales@hushmail.com and we can direct that to the appropriate people, whether it's to Hushmail or we can forward that off to Person-Centered Tech as well. And again, thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Jared.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.